Okay, looks like we are live. So, all right, thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Paul, the head of community. We have a really awesome couple speakers today. So we're featuring Nancy Chauhan, the founder of Women in Cloud Native, and she's going to be talking about her experience founding that organization. And then also we have Jed Cunningham, who's going to be talking about Airflow and Kubernetes. He's a staff software engineer at Astronomer. Before we get into our talks, of course, we always have some community things to discuss. So let me get into that. So first off, I want to say a special thank you to our gold community sponsors, Google Cloud and Percona, as well as our silver sponsors and our community collaborators. Thanks for your sponsorship, which allows us to do things like this, our town halls. Here are a couple of community spotlights. So Patrick McFadden from our community, he was featured in there's been a series of articles, Kubernetes at 10. And Patrick, you can see his article when Kubernetes 1 and life now as a surly teenager. So you can scan the QR code there and read that article. Also, Edith Puya, one of our DoK ambassadors, got a blog post submitted in the CNCF blog, which is the evolution of database operators article. It has a really awesome infographic that you can see the timeline of different operators that were released in for Kubernetes. So yeah, check out those articles if you're interested in reading about those. Again, I just want to give a shout out to Women in Cloud Native. So if you are interested in being involved, we're going to hear a lot more from Nancy about this, but check out scan the QR code and that will take you to the KCD page for Women in Cloud Native. All right, this is really exciting. We announced our ambassadors last month, or this month. So we have 20 DoK ambassadors right now. About 7 or 8 are returning and a bunch of new ones. So we just had orientation with our new ambassadors. There's a lot of really accomplished people with a lot of knowledge and information to share and help the community. So if you see them on LinkedIn, some people have been announcing it. If you know some of these people, congratulate them and welcome them as ambassadors. And you'll be seeing them throughout the community. You know, we're working on some projects. We're probably putting together an ambassador day. So yeah, that's what's going on there. So DoK Day, we will be at KubeCon North America. I've told you a bunch of times. That's going to be on November 12th. You can see the details by scanning the QR code there. The CFP is closed. We had a bunch of submissions, so we're really excited. The notifications for that will happen on Monday, August 26th. So if you submitted, good luck, and you'll know by August 26th. But again, we're excited this will be our 3rd co-located event at KubeCon. Here are a couple upcoming events. So we have a doc talk, which is the anatomy of DBaaS, bringing self-serve databases to Kubernetes with open source. So you can check that out. That's going to be next week on July 23rd. Oops, I put 23rd, which of course that doesn't make sense, but you get the gist. And then of course we have a town hall in August 15th. That'll be Spark batch processing workloads on EKS, and that's going to be with David Fox from Dish Network. So you can scan the QR code there. Check that out. And then of course, if you're interested in being involved in the community, you're already here, so that probably means you have some interest. You can scan the QR code that'll take you to our community page. If you're interested in sponsorship, you can scan the QR code there as well. And then lastly, stick around until the end of the presentations today, and we'll have a little quiz. You can win a DoK t-shirt. And then so with our 2 speakers today, if you have questions, go ahead and add them to the chat, and we'll relay those questions to our speakers, and then at the end of their presentations, they can answer those questions. So yeah, with that being said, I want to introduce Nancy Chauhan. She's the founder of Women in Cloud Native. So we're really excited to have you here today, Nancy. Thanks for joining us, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Paul. So yeah, cool. Let me share my screen. Just let me know if that's visible. Cool.
Yeah, it's loading. Looks good.
Awesome, awesome. So, yeah, thank you so much, Paul, for inviting me today. And I'm super excited for today's session. I'm going to talk more about women in cloud native community. But before we move ahead, I just want to tell a little bit about me. I worked as a DevOps engineer and developer advocate with various startups. I worked at Blinkit, which is the largest e-commerce grocery e-commerce in India. I also worked with Zeotap and then some developer tools like Gitpod and LocalStack. So I'm a CNCF ambassador, AWS community builder. I really love communities. And yeah, that's why I'm here today. Yeah, I'm also part of CNCF Tag Environment Sustainability. I'm leading the project this time. So we're going to have Sustainability Week 2024 in the month of October, where we are going to host the meetups in various regions across the globe to discuss more about sustainability in tech. So if you're interested in it, let me know. Just ping me. I founded Women in Cloud Native Community. I'm going to talk more about it in today's session. So yes, I'm also open for contractual roles. And I love cats and I love traveling a lot, meeting different people, exploring different regions. So yeah, let's get started. So today's talk is about women in cloud native community, which I founded in December 2022. But before that, let's discuss that why diversity is important. So I feel like diversity is crucial in a successful company because it brings different perspectives to solve a problem. And basically understanding all customers, your diverse customers by all the diversity and inclusivity, it basically makes it helps you make better decisions, more inclusive decisions, if you have the whole diversity in your organizations. So yeah, that's about the diversity. This is a graph. Basically, there was a survey conducted by CNCF, and it was basically around the diversity, and it was stated that men are slightly more likely to feel a strong sense of belonging in the OSS community than women and non-binary individuals, with 77% of saying that they agree or strongly agree with the sentiment versus 71% of women and 64% of non-binary individuals. So this statistics basically tells that there's still a lot of work which needs to be done in the organizations in our tech, where we can have more diversity and more inclusivity. And when it comes to inclusivity and diversity, it is not only about the ratio, it's also about how comfortable or what kind of space we are basically having in the organization, which makes it comfortable for everyone. So yeah, this is a screenshot. I was just going through my mail and I came across one. I was just going through my mail yesterday, and then I came across this mail. This was basically I wrote a mail on my last working day, and it was like a goodbye mail. That was the norm there. And someone basically replied back to my mail that best of luck for your future and never got to work with you, but I remember seeing you as the only female identity in a floor full of men. This was the first time when I noticed that, after working for 2 years in that organization, for the first time when I noticed that, oh my God, it was just me. And I was so much swammed into the work, but that I didn't even, take a notice of it. But yeah, this is a thing. And that was the moment when I realized that I need to connect with more women in tech, because I generally knew men in tech and not women. And that is when I started participating in a lot of communities, started connecting with women in the communities. So yeah, this is a problem, and with this problem, I decided that let's have a community of because I've been already working in DevOps and cloud native space. So let's have a community, and we launched it in December 2022. So this was my post on Twitter. I didn't think much and I got a lot of support. That was super nice. A lot of people pinged me. They were happy to have this space where women can connect with each other, even men can connect. I mean, this was a space where everyone can connect with each other, and really glad that we got a lot of support. And also, I remember like when I posted this on the very next day, a lot of people pinged me that let's have a coffee chat, let's discuss what to do. I mean, so many people were excited about it. And then it was a thing. Yeah, these are all wonderful faces. I mean, me, to be honest, I'll be very honest, I did not know much women before creating this community. So I created this community and I got to be in touch with amazing faces over here. I mean, Liz, everyone knows about her. I mean, Nikita, Emily, so many faces are there. Adrina, these are amazing women, and all of them are leaders in their industry. And this was one point that I want to have more leaders. I want to know more about more women leaders in the tech. So community, creating women in cloud native community really helped me to connect with those leaders. So yeah, I mean, this is what I talked about, right? I mean, how can we bridge the gap and we can do it by through connection, collaborative learning, and shared knowledge. As the diagram shows that there's a women, and if we can just connect them with the whole pool of people in tech. I mean, whether it's men and women, so people can learn a lot from each other. I mean, it's just two ways, right? I mean, they can also, I mean, experienced folks or people already in the cloud native industry can learn from newbies. Or so there's a lot of learning and sharing which goes there. I mean, and this eventually inspires more women or more diversity in tech. It inspires more people to enter this area. It makes it more approachable. So the goal of women in cloud native community is to bridge the gap, to connect the people. So yeah, these are the core values: build and share. People in women in cloud native, they build and they ship together, celebrate each other's success, accomplishment, and support. So there could be support in various ways, which I'm going to talk about later. So yeah, and how is this community run? So we right now we have like 2000 plus members like across different platforms. We have a group on community dot groups like the CNCF, and we also have a Discord group. So if I combine, there are like 2000 plus people. That's huge. And that is managed by community builders. And that's I think the backbone of the whole community, because they foster a supportive environment for women in the tech industry, either by organizing events and workshops that encourage learning and networking. And they're strong believers of advocacy for diversity and inclusion. So yeah, big thanks to them. So these are the current community builders. We have Bhavani. She's also the lead organizer. She is really helpful. Um, Such an amazing person, inspiring. We have Sankita. She has a lot of security knowledge and she brings security perspective. We have Amoga, we have Rosaline. So these are the folks who really help running this community. So yeah, we're a part of CNCF community group. So if you want to know more about what's happening in the cloud native women in cloud native community, you can join this group. Um, yeah. So let's talk more about the community work, what's happening in women in cloud native community, and how can you join or help us. So we regularly host podcasts where we reach and share inspiring stories and work. So I do a lot of podcasts with amazing women, and I try to cover most of the leaders in the industry, so that people get role models or maybe someone to look up to, and they can it's a way to make it more approachable. Because to be honest, I feel right now the problem is that there is a lot of lack of knowing. I mean, people really don't know who are there in the there in at the top. So yeah, so this podcast is really about that, sharing the inspiring stories, so that people can reach to them if they really need help. So yeah, we also host and participate in workshops. So there are regular workshops on different topics, and we do it on Bevy, which is the platform provided by CNCF. It's pretty much like Zoom. We use Zoom sometimes as well. The whole idea is to provide a space where people can be comfortable to discuss anything when we are doing the workshops, when we are giving the demos. So this is it. And the coffee chats, this is my favorite. I mean, because I learned a lot by coffee chats. It's just a personalized space where you can, mentor each other, or maybe you can share things with each other. You can help each other with any kind of bugs, or there could be different topics as well, right? Regarding salary negotiations, or maybe developing leadership and soft skills, or maybe how to how to basically jump the career ladder. So there are different topics which you can discuss in coffee chats. So these are the things which are happening at now in Women in Cloud Native community. You can join us on CNCF Slack, the CNCF Women. There's also a Discord group. I think I forgot to put a link here, but you should definitely find it on the social media. So, or maybe I'll share it later in the comment section. So yes, and you can join the CNCF community group. You can just join it. You can get a lot of updates, whatever. I mean, if the workshop is happening, you'll get the updates and you can join the workshops. So, or you can stay connected for the latest updates on the Twitter or maybe the LinkedIn. So yeah, okay. So now comes the future plans and initiatives. Super excited for this because we are planning something. We are planning to launch a mentorship program. The whole idea is this whole 101 thing which goes mentor-mentee, where we can discuss about different things like leadership, or it could be any tech-related work, or maybe how to contribute to OSS, or how to basically get started with one project. So we initial ideas include launching batches for spring and fall. I'm seeking individuals and volunteers to collaborate in developing the program. It would be really appreciated if someone wants to volunteer it with me, designing of the program and launching it. That would be really, really helpful. So that is about the mentorship mentee program. I think it's going to be really helpful. It's going to be really useful for people out there. So let me know if you are interested. So here's the QR code where you can basically participate. So I'm just giving a pause. I mean, you can basically scan this QR code. I'll also paste the link later after my talk. If you want to contribute to the community, maybe as a volunteer, or maybe you want to be a guest to a podcast, or want to host a workshop, or maybe help me design the mentorship programs, you can just let me know in this. And if you have any feedback for the community, that would be really appreciated. If you can just give the feedback. Awesome. So I think with this, we come to end. If you want to get in touch with me, you can scan this QR code. You can reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn, anywhere. Super excited, looking for people to help me run this community. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nancy. Again, if anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Um, yeah, I know. So just to give a little background, I reached out to Nancy because, with DoK, we're also very interested in having representation from all backgrounds and all different people. So I reached out to Nancy, trying to collaborate with her to get more women involved in DoK. And so that's why we invited her today to talk about it. So there's lots of ways to get involved, as Nancy showed. So I recommend, if you're interested, getting involved and reaching out to Nancy to get involved with Women in Cloud Native. Because, yeah, like you said, the more diverse set of opinions you have out there, I think we're all better for that. So, cool. And then, so in terms of like the mentorship program, are you looking for people, all people in the cloud native space, or is it mostly like developers or like different areas of cloud native space?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks, Paul, for asking this. So I did mention in the form as well, which I'm going to paste the link again later. So it could be like into different areas. It could be tech, someone who can give technical guidance to any of the projects. It could be the leadership as well. Someone who can really help with the leadership and soft skills. It could also be related to salary negotiations or anything. I mean, there are certain things, right, which are required. So it's pretty much diverse. It's there mentioned in the form. So yeah, it's pretty much around that. Or someone who can give the guidance about how to about the career ladder. So there are, or maybe the speaking, I mean, conference speaking. So those are the different things which are included in it.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, spread the word. Hear that you heard it from Nancy and us. uh, yeah, I encourage people to get involved in that as well. Um, all right. Well, thank you so much, Nancy. Really appreciate your time. I think what you're doing is great, and we're excited to be collaborating with you, and we'll keep trying to send people your way because we think it's great. Um, cool. Well, next up we have Jed Cunningham, who will be talking about Airflow and Kubernetes. So yeah, I'll hand things over to Jed. Thanks for joining us today as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me here. Let me get screen share going. Cool. You all able to see that? I'll take silence as a yes.
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself. Yep, all looks good.
Cool. Yeah. So, hey, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Yeah, I've been kind of dealing with Airflow and Kubernetes for, I guess, a little more than 5 years now. So both these topics are very near and dear to my heart. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I'm a staff software engineer at Astronomer. I actually kind of like the tech lead on our open source engineering team. We basically have a team of a dozen or so of us that work on Airflow full time for open source reasons. I'm a committer and PMC member in the Apache Airflow community as well. And yeah, as I mentioned, I work at Astronomer. We offer hosted versions of Airflow, and then we also have like enterprise offerings for Airflow on-prem also. So yeah, cool. So today, really, I kind of want to talk a little bit about like Airflow in general. I'm not sure, like, I just want to give a quick, overview of like, what is Airflow? We'll talk about the specific integrations that we have with Kubernetes and like running Airflow on Kubernetes. And yeah, a little spoiler alert, but that leads into the Helm chart a bit. So yeah, let's get started. So what is Apache Airflow? If you go look at the website, one of the first little bits you'll see is that it programmatically author, schedule, and monitor workflows. And that's a reasonable description of what it does. Airflow is really, really flexible ultimately though. And so the programmatic piece is really important. You can schedule and monitor anything really. It doesn't have to be like data workflows, although it is normally used for data purposes. And yeah, kind of that flexibility means that we being Airflow kind of sit at kind of like the central nervous system of a lot of companies. The amount of integrations that we end up having kind of makes it a really powerful tool. And so it ends up getting used for a lot of things. We see a lot where, it gets one team starts using it for a small purpose, and then, it starts to permeate across the organization as more teams are like, that's cool. Let's consolidate and use similar tools. And yeah, so if we look at the like official integrations that Airflow has, we call them providers, and those are packaged separately on PyPy. There's the big ones, the major cloud providers. There's like Databricks, Kafka, and Spark, and then we have a Kubernetes provider, which is good for this audience, and we'll kind of dig into that one specifically more here. But just before we do, a little more general Airflow stuff. So Airflow on PyPy, roughly in the 25 million downloads per month range. This is like really ramped up over the last few years, which is great to see. We're really close. I don't know. As of a few days ago, we hadn't hit it yet, but we're like a couple dozen away from hitting 3,000 contributors to Airflow, which is amazing. I'm pretty sure we're a pretty good margin in the lead in the Apache Software Foundation for individual contributors. We have 35,000 stars on GitHub and 45,000 members on our Slack, which is pretty active. Cool. So programmatic. This is an example of what an Airflow DAG looks like, and this is kind of a weird mashup. We actually see some of the old styles where we're using operators, and then we also have the task decorator there, which is kind of the new task flow style of authoring DAGs. But yeah, basically you write your workflows or whatever you want in Python, and you can use the flexibility of Python to be really creative with the way that you kind of build your workflows. There's good and bad aspects of that, but I think that flexibility is really powerful. And then, yeah, this is one quick screenshot of that DAG in the Airflow UI. There's a ton of really cool features in the UI. We've kind of evolved the UI a lot over the last, couple of years, but this is kind of like the high level. You can see what runs you have, you can dig into logs, you can see like timing, and yeah, this is going to get better too, and we'll spoil alert for later. Cool. So let's dig a little bit more into the Kubernetes provider specifically. This is the package name on PyPy if you wanted to install it. So what's in there? There's 7 operators. There's 1 sensor, 1 hook, and a couple executors. Maybe like, what the heck are these things? And we'll talk about some of these a little more as we go. But this is actually one of the smaller providers. If you go look at some of the cloud vendor providers, for example, there's dozens of each of these. So the surface area here is small. Sorry, went too far. All right, so if you go out to Airflow and you're Google rather, and you type in Airflow Kubernetes, you're going to end up seeing results for Kubernetes pod operator and Kubernetes executor. And one of the very first questions that people have are like, which do I want to use? Do I need to use both? Do I have to use both? And let's dig into this question a little bit, because as I said, it comes up constantly. So let's back up though and be like, okay, what is an operator and an executor to begin with? And really, they kind of are. They're very. I guess they're very different things. The way to think about operators is that's like, what does this task need to do? This is like I'm authoring a workflow. I need to go out and do X. I need to go send an email. I need to go push a file to S3. The executor is more about how do I run any task, right? Nothing specific about that email I need to send, but how do I do any work in the system? So this is more like infrastructure and an environment question, and especially in like larger deployments of Airflow, the role of who is worrying about which operator and which executor to use are different, right? One would be the DAG author, and one would be the deployment manager. So yeah, let's dig into some operators a little bit here. So there's some generic operators. Python operator and Bash operator are kind of the 2 canonical examples there, where you can really do anything you want with those. You don't get a lot out of the box. Like it's, hey, I'm going to go run this Python callable, or hey, I'm going to go run this command line in Bash. Then you end up having like that middle column, which is specific integrations with things. So I mentioned S3 operations earlier. There's a ton of S3 operators that you can use. There's SQL things, email, there's Slack operators, name it. There's 92, I think I said earlier, 92 different services that we kind of have integrations with. And so this is kind of like it's a very valuable piece of Airflow. And it lets you be quick and kind of have a standardized way to integrate with these things. Now, the Kubernetes pod operator, which I mentioned earlier, that is more of a generic operator ultimately. The best way to think of it is it's kind of like your Docker run. Basically, I just need to go run a container, right? It generally isn't Airflow things. You end up seeing a lot of things that are written in other languages, Go, for example. But yeah, Kubernetes pod operator is definitely more on the generic side. And then, so let's talk about executors a little bit. Your executor choice is kind of a cult following in some ways, but if you sit down and like try to back up and look at it from a technical perspective, you kind of get to choose speed or isolation. And so I kind of put this little table together, and there's definitely some blurry lines here, but by and large, it's fair to say that local executor, which will run a task in the scheduler itself as like a separate process, that's really fast, right? Like Airflow is already loaded in memory. It's not spinning up new, Python environments or anything. It's very, very quick to go run a single task in that environment. Celery executor uses Celery, which communicates over traditionally Redis, but any message queue. I guess there's a few that are supported, and So that has like a little more overhead in that you have to put the message into the queue and wait for a worker to pick it up and run it. But like in the grand scheme of things, the latency that you're adding there is pretty low. And so that's still pretty quick. Kubernetes executor here, this is probably the biggest downside to Kubernetes executor is the startup latency. You have to, like, the scheduler has to build a pod and it has to send it to Kubernetes. Kubernetes has to put it on a node. That node may have to pull an image. You got to wait for the container to start, aka Python to start. Airflow is fairly large dependency wise, so it isn't exactly the quickest to start up, and you pay that cost for every task with Kubernetes executor. So yeah, just from like that perspective, a lot of it will depend on the type of tasks that you're running, right? If you have a ton of tasks, right? If you're turning over tasks very, very quickly, that extra latency of Kubernetes executor can really have a meaningful impact in like your overall workflow duration. Whereas if you have things that run longer, like an hour or something, the cost of 5 to 10 seconds is really not material at that point. Excuse me. There's also a bit of a like complexity of deployment. So local executor is super easy. You don't have to do anything special at all. Celery executor, you do have to set up the queue and start up separate workers, but it's still pretty easy. Kubernetes executor, there's a little caveat here. The deployment manager takes in a lot of the complexity here for you, and it does kind of limit, like architecturally where you can place different components like the Airflow database, because all these workers have to be able to go talk to the Airflow database as well. And so, yeah, as I said, there's a little bit of a caveat because normally like DAG authors don't have to deal with any of that. And then especially if you're using a Helm chart, or for example, all that complexity is really kind of hidden from you anyway. And we'll kind of see that in an example later. So why would you ever want to use Kubernetes executor? Well, here's where it really shines, is with the isolation that you get and the ability to define like custom resources. With both local executor and Celery executor, you're running more than just your task in that component. And so, say I'm running 16 tasks in a worker, and the worker OOMs. How do I know which task was the culprit? I don't. With Kubernetes executor, you can be very specific and give, a very like resources dedicated to that task and that task alone. Therefore, if it does OOM, that task was the culprit and not, maybe being the victim of, a noisy neighbor. And then, yeah, custom resources, say you need, custom secret or volume mounted or something for a specific task. You don't want to share that, have it be available to other tasks. Very easily do that with Kubernetes executor. And this is where it gets weird. There's what we've traditionally called hybrid executors, which are kind of a mashup of these. So, we see Celery Kubernetes executor and local Kubernetes executor here. Both of those are default tasks will go to Celery and then opt into Kubernetes, or local and then opt into Kubernetes. And those are pretty well. We don't see a huge adoption of those executors, but they do exist. And it does let you be a little bit more flexible around which executor specific tasks use. And so if you have a more mixed usage of Airflow in your environment, this can let you be a little smarter about how things are run. And then kind of confusingly named, we have the hybrid executor coming in Airflow 2.10, which should be here in a month or so. And this basically takes the concept of these two hybrid executors that I have above here, and it really lets you run any combination and let you route tasks to any executor that you want. And so you could conceivably have, Celery Kubernetes executor, local executor. There's a couple of AWS specific ones. Like you could use all of them in the same Airflow deployment if you wanted to. So that's a cool, future that we're kind of looking at in Airflow. Yeah. So if we zoom back out to the original question of like KPO versus Kubernetes executor, any combination work, really any combination of any executor and any operator work. because they're really solving, like, they're different pieces of the airflow. So yeah, don't force any associations there. Cool. So let's look a little bit at KPO, and we're going to actually walk through some examples of how different executors, will schedule this out. And maybe that'll kind of help cement what these things mean. So if we look at this code here, we have a very simple DAG, one task, and we have a task ID, and we have a name. That's kind of the name of the pod that we want. We have the image, and we have the commands we want to run. This is really complex. We're saying hi. And so this is like the very bare bones of Kubernetes pod operator. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, right, this is kind of like the Docker run equivalent in Airflow. So let's walk through and see what this looks like with different executor choices. So let's imagine that we have all of Airflow running in Kubernetes already. And we go run that DAG. By default, what it'll do is it'll go create a new ephemeral pod for that, Docker run this container. It'll run it in that same cluster, right alongside the other components of Airflow. Now, you're not restricted to that, though. You can actually run Airflow completely outside of Kubernetes, and the same thing can happen, right? You can run Airflow outside of Kubernetes and have this pod spin up in a Kubernetes cluster. You can even go to a different Kubernetes cluster if you want. So there's a lot of flexibility here. Now, Kubernetes executor is where it gets a little more interesting, right? If you remember back when we were talking about the trade-offs of different things, that basically every Airflow task gets a separate worker pod created for it. And so when we combine Kubernetes executor and Kubernetes pod operator together, we end up with actually two different ephemeral pods for that specific task, right? So the scheduler will go out and create the worker, which then actually runs that Kubernetes pod operator task, which then goes out and creates another pod in the cluster. And it may sound a little weird, like, why do we need two? But there's a lot of, there's some features in Airflow that kind of require a babysitter, I guess, for the actual task pod there, right? So hello world, it can't run its own callbacks in Airflow, for example. And so that worker exists to kind of make sure that KPO is integrated well with the ecosystem that Airflow has ultimately. And yeah, what does that look like for a non-KPO task? Then let's use Python operator as an example. In this case, you do just get the one pod. So in this case, yeah, you get the one worker pod for that Python operator, and yeah, it should be hopefully straightforward. Cool. So when we're deploying Airflow, like how does Kubernetes executor know how to build these pods? Well, the way it's done is with a pod template file. So if you go way back into Airflow 1 days, we actually tried to enumerate all of the features of pods in our config, which was painful. So now we have basically a pod template file. We inject it, or sorry, we consume it and use that as a base for the pods that the scheduler creates. And as you can see here, it has like very basic things, right? It has a container named base. That's kind of the main container there. Airflow will actually kind of inject the right image to use, and normally you'll end up having a service account that's specific to workers in Airflow. You can mount config, you can mount whatever you want. One interesting thing that I left in here kind of intentionally so we could talk about it is that it feels a little weird that if you look here, the executor override via an environment variable here that we actually run, we're saying, hey, use local executor when you start this worker. This is a little bit of historical baggage that Airflow has today. I'm hoping that with Airflow 3 that's coming, spoiler alert, that we'll be able to kind of clean this up. But this is a really important piece to make sure that the task doesn't end up in kind of a weird nested loop of trying to create a pod again and again and again. So this basically forces it to run locally in that worker. Yeah. And then that's not the only way. So that's how like a deployment manager would come in and say, hey, I want every worker pod to have X. Well, sometimes you need to be a little more specific. Remember, I mentioned that like, hey, custom resources, custom, volumes, what have you, like per task. Well, how do you do that? This is how you do it. It's executor config pod override more specifically, and it allows you to kind of build a Python pod operator, a Python pod object, and pass that into Airflow, and Airflow will kind of take the base pod that it would create and like layers this on top, and it merges those. And so this gives the DAG authors the ability to be more specific for this specific task. Hey, I need this. So that's how you can kind of, as a DAG author, customize your experience. Cool. Let's chat about the Kubernetes pod operator a little bit more. So there's a lot of like native support, and by native I mean like keyword arguments for things like resources, volumes, tolerations. I mean, there's security contacts, and there's a ton. There's a whole multiple pages of options here. And so more often than not, you end up having a keyword arg that you can specify that feels kind of natural to kind of override whatever you're trying to do there. And yeah, but there's one feature that I want to call out specifically. If we come back to this example that I showed earlier, where we have those two pods, the one is the Airflow worker and one is the actual task pod, like feels weird. Maybe there's a better way, and there is. So Airflow has the concept of deferrable mode for operators, and not all of them support it. But if the job that is being run, or if the task that's being run can be monitored with an async process, then we can use what's called the trigger in Airflow, which is kind of a specialized worker. And what it kind of does is it lets the worker start up, and then you can do what we call defer. And basically you can like shut down the worker part of this task and kick the responsibility over to the trigger, which really just kind of runs an async IO thread, an async IO process. And it runs a bunch of async IO code to kind of wait and detect when the main job or whatever it is that you're trying to watch is done. So Kubernetes pod operators are a really classic example of where this is beneficial, right? That worker otherwise would sit there essentially idle and doing nothing for the whole duration of the KPO pod. And so if we're able to like start up, kick it over to the trigger, the worker can shut down, the resources for that worker can go back into the Kubernetes cluster, be used for other things, be used for other tasks in Airflow. Even there's a really lightweight piece on the trigger that is able to kind of keep tabs on that pod that it created. And then once that pod finishes, hey, we can kick back up, start another worker, and do whatever cleanup we may need to do. So in practice, what this looks like is, that first box, we start, we go create the pod, and then we shut down. And then at some time later, we come back, we created another ephemeral pod to do that cleanup. So yeah, this is what you see. You're frustrated. So especially if you have like long running tasks, really nice option to reduce resource usage. And honestly, it's a little more resilient too. Triggers in Airflow are way more resilient to failure than like distinct worker pods. So yeah, that's another benefit. Cool. KPO also can be customized even further. I mentioned there's a lot of things that are built in, but we definitely haven't covered every nook and cranny. And so we do offer these options as well. And you may want to use these for easier standardization too across tasks. Again, Airflow DAGs are Python, and so you can do a lot of creative things to reduce boilerplate. And then I just want to mention the pod mutation hook. If you research Airflow and Kubernetes, pod mutation hook is also likely to come up as well. This is kind of the original way to customize pods that Airflow creates. What's a little weird is that you actually get both Kubernetes executor pods and Kubernetes pod operator pods as like they both get passed through this callback. And so if there are things that you want to do for one or not the other, you basically are responsible for figuring out what type of pod it is and only doing it on the right pods. But this is kind of like the big hammer. If none of the other configuration options work for you, this is how you can pull it off. Cool. We also have Kubernetes job operator, and you may be kind of like, well, why would you have both? Like a job operator and a pod operator feels a little weird. Well, it kind of comes back to like who handles retries and who's responsible for kind of like breaking up the work. The nice thing about Kubernetes pod operator is that it is literally a pod, and so if it fails, cool. That kicks us back into Airflow's ecosystem to like deal with retries. Like, do you have any? How many do you have left? That sort of thing. And then also with the Airflow has different tooling, I guess, for things like parallelism and completion. And so if you're trying to plug in Airflow into like an existing job process, like the job operator is a good answer. But yeah, it's kind of pick your journey here as to like, do you like the job approach in Kubernetes, or do you like Airflow's answer to some of these problems? And then there's a couple sibling operators here. The Kubernetes job operator will go out and create the job, but you also have a delete job operator and a patch job operator that are kind of in the same bubble. Cool. And then I think last but not least, I guess we'll see, is the Spark Kubernetes operator. I'll admit I don't really have as much experience with this one, but it basically is an integration to make using the kubeflow Spark operator more native in Airflow. It'll actually go out and create the Spark application CRD for you. And yeah, it's as I said, it's one that I don't really have a whole lot of experience with, but does get some traction in the community. So if you are using that kubeflow Spark operator, this is a good option. Cool. So let's say you're sold. You're like, okay, I'm down. Let's go. How do I run Airflow? Well, you could always go out and write your own Kubernetes manifests to start these things on Kubernetes. We're talking a handful of components. It's not that complex. And hey, you could also kind of take that a step further and go write your own Helm chart. If you haven't done that exercise, it's a good one. I guarantee you'll learn some stuff. Or you could use some existing charts that are in the ecosystem. So say you want to go the easier path and go down the charts path. So there's really three big options today. There's the Bitnami chart. There's also the user community chart. Excuse me, the user community chart, which this is the chart that used to be in Helm Stable before Helm Stable died. And then we have an official community chart. Full disclosure, I'm the release manager for the official chart. So I'm a bit biased as to which one you should choose. But ultimately, the official chart is released by the same group of people, the same group of release managers as the core Airflow releases happen. So yeah, that's a positive. We do a pretty good job of making sure that things are compatible. We have over 170 contributors, which just to the chart, which is amazing. It's been really cool, kind of reviewing PRs and kind of seeing new faces swing through. And yeah, it's been a really kind of rewarding experience to see this grow from, a dozen of us kind of poking at it to yeah, now 170. Our chart is definitely production focused. We don't support some features that, some other charts might, that are more like development environment centric. And so some of the design choices are, like view it from the lens of trying to be resilient in production. We support Airflow 2.0 plus, and I'll mention it. I didn't want to write it in the slides, but we do. It does still technically support Airflow 1.10, but if you're still using Airflow 1.10, you should really upgrade. It supports basically all of the executors, all of the ones that you'd want to use in production for sure. We also have JSON schema for values, which is a nice way to make sure that, what you are trying to configure will actually work, that you're not off in the weeds and, configuring things that don't exist or what have you. The Helm chart also works with Argo CD, Flux, Rancher, Terraform. Yeah, like we try to be open to alternate deployment methods if you aren't actually using Helm. And there's a ton of features. I mean, we have like Git sync built in, and all kinds of cool things. But we haven't covered everything, and so if there are things that we haven't covered, definitely open for PRs or even feature requests to kind of make it a better experience. Yeah, and it's really easy to get started. Ultimately, it's hey, add our repo, and off to the races. You do your Helm install and set your executor to Kubernetes executor, and you're off. That'll end up spinning up all the things that you kind of need. We have our database, although you wouldn't want to use that piece for production. You'd want to swap that out. We have a whole production guide as to like things that you want to change from this kind of like bare install, get started install, to make it more production ready. But yeah, this is like a working Airflow. Cool. And then, yeah, kind of like back to the Kubernetes executor side of things. A lot of the things that you'd want to configure on a worker by default are exposed through the values file in the chart. And so you can, for example, set the resources for work, like the default resources for workers in that in the values file. You can do tolerations, like all that stuff. And if you connect the dots, what this ends up doing when you set these is it goes and sets the appropriate stuff in the pod template file, right? The chart builds the pod template file for you. Or of course you can always override it as well in values file if you wanted to. Cool. Let's talk about Airflow 3 a little bit. So these are kind of like really high level things. We're like ramping up on Airflow 3 development. There's like active conversations going on all over the place. We're targeting next March or April for release, and so it's a shorter window. We're trying to really kind of get it out quickly. But at a high level, we have a new task execution interface that's coming. And really what that means is we're removing the need for Airflow workers to have direct database access. And so it provides a lot better isolation for tasks in an Airflow instance. It also opens the door for things like non-Python tasks, like say having a task that's written in Go. And then it also opens the door for remote workers, like running workers that are very, very separate infrastructure-wise from the rest of your Airflow components. We're going to have further data awareness features like partitioning and polling and like versioning on data sets and things. So a lot more of where kind of like continuing down that journey of making Airflow more data aware. I'm really excited about this one. And then, yeah, we're solving the long-standing shortcoming of Airflow with adding DAG versioning. So gone are the days of using all these abilities to like what your DAG looked like in the past. And yeah, so DAG versioning is coming. And yeah, that's of these three, the DAG versioning is the one that I'm specifically working on. And so yeah, really looking forward to getting that Airflow 3. Cool. Last thing here I just want to call out is we're having Airflow Summit in San Francisco in September. We have all kinds of tracks with, like beginner track all the way up to dealing with very complex use cases. We're celebrating our 10-year anniversary of Airflow being an open source project while we're there. So yeah, if you're in San Francisco or are able to come, I'd love to meet you all there. Yeah, me and my team will be out there in force. So yeah, if you do make it out, find me, come say hi. And yeah, with that, I think that's really all I had. I kind of realized as I was driving over here today that I probably should join the Docker on Kubernetes Slack and be available there for questions. And so, but in the Apache Airflow Slack, these are the channels that I kind of hang out in, and you're welcome to DM me or whatever. So yeah, I think that's all I got.
All right, thanks, Jed. I'll send you an invite to the DoK Slack channel, but I was going to ask you where people can go, but you answered my question. So if you have questions about running Airflow on Kubernetes, you can join the those channels on the Airflow Slack group. Yeah, I'll send you an invite so then we can also make you accessible on our channels. I had a question, if people have questions, feel free to add them. But I had a question, it struck me when you were talking about you had almost 3,000 contributors. I know there's like a high barrier to entry in contributing to these projects. Like, what do you attribute the high number of contributors to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think part of it is just the wider usage of Airflow is really massive, right? Like Airflow is used for all kinds of different things ultimately. And so I think we just have relatively a bigger pool of users that are using it. And to really use Airflow, you have to have at least some level of Python skills, generally speaking, right? To write these workflows. And so I think there's maybe a little more overlap with people that are, comfortable with at least basic programming that are able to kind of come in and actually author PRs. I'll also say that we try very hard to focus on being very welcoming to new contributors. I spend, I try to be very, very helpful with people that are new. For us, it's very easy to see when it's the first PR that people open, and I try to help them with little things that make their journey a little smoother, like getting static checks pre-commit running locally so that they can fix little static check issues that they have without having to wait on CI. And yeah, so I think the maintainers communication with new folks, and we even have a Slack channel that's dedicated to helping people that are starting down their contributing journey. That helps too. We also try really hard to be welcoming to any contribution. A lot of people got their start with a minor docs PR, and that's totally cool. We are more than happy to come in and merge a typo fix or something that's rewording just a little bit of something on the docs. We are absolutely open to that level of contribution as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, the very few number of pull requests I've submitted to some projects, it can definitely be intimidating. So, you don't quite necessarily know if you're doing things right. So having people, I think, to guide you through it, that seems like a really useful thing to do. Well, we are running up against time. So I guess we'll thank you both, Nancy and Jed, for your presentations. It was super useful. Of course, we'll post this on YouTube so anybody can watch this later. But we try and get through our quiz. So we have our quiz that Digest will run, and if anybody can participate. And if you scan the QR code there with your phone, it's just a pretty simple quiz, just some questions basically based off these presentations. If you want to join, you can just scan the QR code there, and then we'll run through that real quick. The winner can contact me on Slack or whatever, because we don't necessarily see everybody's names. But then we can we can send the winner a shirt, a DoK shirt. So we'll let people scan that. Diogenes is in control of the quiz. All right, here we go. This one, we'll see who was paying attention. Oh, we have one player. We need another player. Otherwise, player one wins the shirt. Well, I think if Nancy, if you play, you're going to do very well. Well, I don't know if we have. Okay, we have one player back, maybe. Okay, Diogenes, do we have any other players?
That's all we've got for now.
All right, I say we go with the one player. You're gonna win the shirt,
Okay.
regardless. I say we go for it. Oh, two players. Yes. Okay. Oh, what happened to question one? Question one. In what year did Nancy launch Women in Cloud Native? Is it 2020, 2021, 2022? Okay, everyone's voted. The quicker you vote, the more points you get. Yes. Okay, everybody got it right. People are paying attention. Okay. Ooh, looks like Nemo answered just slightly before. Okay, here's the next question. Okay, what does Nancy like to do outside of work? We've got skydiving and rock climbing, extreme, cooking and eating, cats and traveling, or stamp collecting and cartography. All right, cats and traveling. I thought it was going to be extreme sports. Oh, well, we got some new people. Awesome. Okay. You can still come from behind if you just answer quickly. You late comers. Okay, what services do the Women in Cloud Native provide to Cloud Native community? So we've got workshops, podcasts, coffee chats, or all of the above. All right, all the above for the win. All those services. So that's another reason why you should follow Women in Cloud Native. And then we have one Airflow question here. Okay, what is the primary purpose of Apache Airflow? We wrote this question before you spoke, Jed, so we hope it aligns with what you said. All right, seems like everybody got it right. Nice. Okay, we'll find out who the winner is. I don't see the name, but if you are the winner, looks like, is that the official? Bell. No? Yep, Bell was the winner. Okay, if you are Bell, reach out to me. You can do it on Slack. You can email me, find me on LinkedIn, whatever, and we'll send you a DoK shirt. Yeah, thanks for participating. And we'll call this as the end to the talk or of the town hall. Again, thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Jed. Really appreciate you giving us your time. This is super useful for the community, and we'll talk to you later. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. Have a good day.